so glad to be sharing this work with everybody. It's something that I've been meaning to share for a long time. And I find myself giving my clients a lot of exercises based on this work. And it was probably about 20 years ago that, when I was living in London, I came across A Course in Miracles, and I started studying it quite deeply and spent a number of years of my life studying A Course in Miracles. And I just found that it provided so many useful tools, so many useful practices that have really helped me out so much in life, through business challenges, difficult bosses, relationship breakups, and even fatherhood, that I just thought it would really be useful to get some tools together and really share them with people in a lot more depth. And I've really found these practices to be transformative in my life. So I was really quite keen to share them. And I know Val's got her own story to share.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, very excited to be here tonight. When the intro was playing, it always gets a bit of rhythm within my heart and connects me to my heart space. And tonight, really, what we're going to share and what I'm going to share as part of my story as why I'm here is how I got this far. How did I get here? And there were many processes and steps that I had to move through. And at times I had to be very courageous to find a path to forgiveness, non-judgment, all those things that we share and we're going to chat about tonight. And as I said, Cindy said that I'm very passionate about meditation. And as we get together, I will guide us through a meditation. And what I love about meditation is, for me, it's a little bit different to prayer, where prayer we're talking. And in meditation, for me, it's more about connecting and receiving insights and guidance. And I trust that tonight, as we share some of the insights that we've received and some of the practices and processes we've put in place for ourselves, and things that I share with my clients, that they might just drop a seed and whisper to your soul and assist you in maybe putting things into practice that you can find growth, possibly some healing, transformation. And I always say, as I sit down in meditation, I sit in meditation so that as I work with myself, others and myself may rise up and share our light with the world. So I look forward to spending this time with Mark and sharing this time with you. And yeah, Mark, shall I take us through the meditation?
Yeah, please.
So for those of you that are sitting on a chair, feel yourself comfortable on the chair. And possibly for those of you that are lying down, allow yourself to be comfortable and allow your body to be received by the couch or the bed that you're lying on. And if you're sitting on a chair, feel your sitting bones and gently start bringing awareness to your breath. The breath that moves in and out of the body. There's no story with the breath. The breath arrives and it comes in, and the breath moves out of the body. And as you bring awareness to the breath, bring awareness to your body as well. As you relaxed your body now, as we sit here in a relaxed way, bring awareness to your body. And as you bring awareness to the body, maybe you'd like to draw your eyes down or close them and work with the intention of relaxing the body and to open the heart. Everything we share tonight comes from a heart space, so allow your body to be relaxed and your heart to be open. And I'm going to guide you through a practice as we feel your feet on the ground. If you're sitting, feel the grounding, and if you need to, drop some roots down, deep, deep, deep into Mother Earth. And if you're lying down, work with the intention of grounding yourself to the earth energy and connecting to that earth energy. So get a sense of being grounded. And then I invite you to take your awareness up above, however that is for you, if it's source, the divine, if it's God, feel that connection to that powerful healing energy of love and light. So you have this earth energy holding and the powerful healing energy from above. And bring that down through the top of your head and allow it to move through the brow and the throat and arrive in your heart space. And then the energy from below, we bring that up and it comes up through our lower limbs, through our base, our sacral, and the solar plexus, and it also arrives in the heart space. So we have this powerful holding, nurturing energy, and this connected energy, which we center now in our hearts. So get a sense of that energy now in the heart space. And allow that energy just to fill your heart space. And then move your awareness in that heart space, in that energy center, to the left side of that energy center. And allow that energy from the left to nourish you. Feel the nourishment from that heart space as you become nourished. So there's a nourishing energy coming through and up into the heart and out from the heart. Then take your awareness gently to the bottom of the heart space, that energy, and feel that strength and powerful energy of Mother Earth. Feel how strong you can feel, and that powerful energy of our connection to all that is, to the divine. So we are nourished and we're strong in our heart space. And then we move to the right of that heart energy. And I want you to get a sense of compassion. Get a sense of the heart that has compassion. Tap into that compassion as we share this space together. And take your awareness gently to the front of the heart space. And get a sense of the courage that the heart holds for you as you need to change and make shifts and transformations. Tap into that courage from the heart space. And let's not forget about the back of our hearts. There's that beautiful wisdom, the wisdom that gives us direction, that intelligence of the heart to move us forward in our lives. And then most of all, we move to the top of the heart space and we connect to that beautiful connection that connects us to all that is. And we sit with that connection in the heart space. And for a moment, often we talk about listening to the whispers or the sounds of the soul. And the way that I believe we hear these whispers and these sounds is if we move into practices like meditation. Often we talk about the birds in the trees, but I trust that you'll find a time in your practices as you move and grow in your life that you'll hear the birds and the sounds of the birds within yourself, that you'll be so connected that everything is within. And that is a place of peace when it's all within. And before I move us out of this meditation, I leave you with these few words which you could say to yourself. I am whole. I am loved. I am love. I am peace. So from a heart-centered, grounded, connected space, we now trust and know that as we share together, we are protected in this beautiful space. So check yourself, check your grounding. Feel your sitting bones on the chair, and if you're lying on the bed, just give your body a wiggle, bringing yourself back into the room and into the space. And if it's comfortable, have a nice big stretch and just exhale. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Val. I wish we could have gone on forever with that, but we have a message to share, and I think we're just going to dive straight in with it. And where we want to start tonight is talking about the process of forgiveness, and really just starting with a simple process of forgiveness that can be used on a daily basis. And the process is really quite simple. And I just want to outline the 4 steps to this everyday forgiveness, or to the process that we can use on a regular basis. I'm not talking about the big things so much, although practicing forgiveness on a daily basis really helps with the big things. But on a daily basis, we are faced with situations that kind of trigger us. And we get an opportunity to practice forgiveness on a regular basis. And the 4 steps are quite simple: awareness, willingness, asking for help from a higher power, and then repeating. And we're going to sort of tap into these as we go through this process. But awareness is the key to starting the process, becoming aware of when something has triggered us. Because a lot of the time we aren't aware. And sure enough, there are times when we are quite aware that we've been triggered, but a lot of the time it is quite subtle. And through awareness of our bodies, through awareness of our state of mind, our emotional state, and our spiritual connection, we will be able to identify when something is amiss and when we need to apply a spiritual practice to get us back into the heart. Because when we are triggered, we are taken out of the heart space. And if you guys, after that lovely meditation, if you just had to think of somebody who's wronged you, yeah, think about whatever it is. Jacob Zuma is in prison now, so we can't use that example. But if you had to just, I don't know, maybe it's one of your parents, maybe it's your ex, maybe it's a teacher from school, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your partner who doesn't put the lid on the toothpaste, or whatever it is. As you think of that, notice what happens in the body. And, sometimes it's just a subtle tightening, a tension that arises in the body. Sometimes we feel an emotion arising that we can even identify. Sometimes we go into outright rage, but, we don't realize, we don't see that as a problem. So, the awareness is the key, and it is such an important step. Well?
Yeah, Mark, it's such a powerful thing, and I think we speak about often that when something has happened to us, you used the words when we were chatting the other day about ruminating on the event. And I've got a beautiful story to share about 2 monks going for their ritual, a walk along a river. And the 2 monks are walking along, and the one's senior and the other one's junior. And it had really been raining, just like it has been here in Cape Town. And the river was really flowing aggressively. And they spotted a very beautiful woman in the river trying to cross it, at the banks of the river, trying to cross the river. And the senior monk walked over and he assisted the lady. He helped her up and helped her cross the river. And the junior monk was observing this and not quite sure what was happening. Anyway, the 2 monks continued to walk along their path, carried on walking, but the junior monk was very concerned about what the senior had just done. And he said, I need to ask, I need to ask. We are not supposed to touch women, and you picked her up and carried her across the river. How can that be? And the senior monk looked at the junior and just observed him, and he said, I picked her up, I carried her across the river, and I put her down. But I see you still carrying her. And I suppose that's how we sometimes are in our lives with issues that arrive. We carry on with them, we hold on to them, we still carry them. And part of softening the heart and opening the heart is just that allowing, that small opening for forgiveness. And Mark, I like to always say that forgiveness is actually a decision. You decide, you make a decision. And as you make this decision on a more regular basis, you then develop a practice of forgiving. And it's much easier with the small processes than the bigger ones. But as you practice, it becomes a practice, and it becomes like breathing. You know, we talk about grounding in the school, grounding, and I suppose forgiveness in small practices as a practice becomes like your grounding and your breathing.
Yeah.
And I like to call it heart medicine. Medicine for the heart. When you practice to forgive, it's medicine for the heart.
Yeah, I've really seen some miracles come from the practice of forgiveness, and I've been very grateful that I developed it as a practice for myself before I needed it as a practice for myself.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
some of the other clues, some of the other points to awareness are the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And, obviously with some of this, deeper healing is required, but sometimes it is just about applying a practice. There was a time a few years ago when I was triggered into a fight response. Before I started working as a healer, my wife, who's a designer, and I were running we had a business designing furniture, and we manufactured some furniture. We had a couple of guys who worked in a workshop. One of the guys was very, very talented, and he had been working with us for a while. He could do everything, and we were coming up to a big exhibition at the Cape Town International Convention Center, where we were entered into a competition for the best new product, and we had to get a range of our furniture ready and complete for this exhibition at the same time as delivering to our clients and meeting our regular orders, and on a very tight budget. And what transpired was our star carpenter actually turned out to have a bit of a drinking problem that seemed to be under control, and we sort of kept an eye on him, and kept him kept a close eye on him, making sure he was always delivering and so on. But 2 days before we had to deliver this furniture, he disappeared with several of our tools, worth a lot of money, and he just disappeared. He was there in the morning when I opened up, and when I got back a few hours later, he had disappeared and all our equipment was gone. And I was already under a lot of pressure, and I was just furious. Knowing that he had a drinking problem, I jumped in the car and I drove around the neighborhood, going into, not the best of neighborhoods, but there are a lot of bars around that neighborhood. And I went and I walked into each of these bars looking for this guy, because I was going to grab him by the ear and drag him outside, and I don't know what was going to happen next. But I was furious, and this fury didn't subside. And, got to the end of the day, I still hadn't found him. We still didn't have our tools. We still couldn't proceed with the work. And I realized that I needed to have a different approach. And this is when I started the whole forgiveness process. And I knew that we needed a miracle. I knew the steps, and I knew what I had to do, I didn't really want to do it, but I had no other option. And so I started trying to forgive this guy. And so it went on, and so it went on. And I was just kept keeping a mantra in my mind to forgive this guy. And eventually what happened is the following morning, his wife phoned us. We had never met his wife. We didn't even know he had a wife. But his wife phoned us and said, he's come home, he's passed out in bed, and she's found all these tickets to the pawn shop in his wallet. And it's and she knew that he had been working for us. And we managed to go, and we picked up the tickets from her, went to the pawn shops, got our equipment back. I mean, he had sold the stuff. I think he had actually loaned it to the pawn shop and was planning on buying it back when he got paid at the end of the week. So we bought our stuff back cheap, and we managed to finish the order. We managed to finish this thing, and we did quite well. We won the prize for the best new product. But I see that as a miracle, because there's no way that that sort of stuff just falls into place like that, and you can still pull it out the bag when the day before we were up the creek without a paddle, and all of a sudden it sort of fell into place. So, I was well aware that time, but I think that might take us on to the next step, Val.
Yeah, and before we go on to the next step, Mark, I'm going to read something. And Mark and I were chatting, and when we were talking about this process, and I was in meditation one morning, I got an insight drop into me. And I share this, I've never shared this with anybody before. It comes out of one of my journals, and it takes us back to 2007, in fact, to July. And the reason why I share this, because what it highlights, this was a big forgiveness process that I went through. This wasn't something small. But what it highlights is the kind of words that I used, what was going in my body, how disconnected I was, how angry I was. And what it highlights now is to see that when you move through a process, however small or big, that there is healing and transformation. So I read this to you from an open heart. It's a little bit vulnerable for me, but it's something I wrote, and it just lets you take a snapshot into where I was at. And this is what I wrote. I hate how you harmed my body. I hate that I suffered at your hands. I hate that I can't remember all what happened. I hate that I can't ask you why. I hate that I doubt myself, but I know that such deep pain exists inside of me, and I have to let it out. You should be punished, and yet I can't punish you. I suffer in a body that shows its pain on a daily basis. I can't explain to anyone. The tears flow. Hopefully, this will bring release. I'm angry, angry, angry. And I share that not to, just to give you insight into how much healing and process and how forgiveness has brought me in this process to a place that I am. And the way I got there were three things that I like to talk about. I call them the 3 C's. And for me, the 3 C's are what I call, we speak about it a lot, is conscious presence. And what is conscious presence? For me, that's present moment awareness, what Mark shared so beautifully about being aware. And in the awareness, it's what's happening with us all the time, in our minds, our bodies, in everything that's going on. And the other part of the C is commitment to process. So you can have the awareness, and then you have to bring in a form of commitment to the process. So if the commitment is practicing to forgive on the small forgivenesses, so when the big one does arrive, mine worked the other way around. I call it my long walk to freedom, like Madiba did, 27 years. And I'm very grateful my process wasn't 27, but doesn't have to be a long walk. It can be actual process as you commit daily to offering forgiveness to yourself for what's going on. And in the process and the commitment takes courage. So, as Mark's story might seem funny that he went looking for the guy and into the bars, but although he was furious, there had to be some courage to engage if he was going to find him. So no matter how big or how small, you have to have the courage to follow the process. And I think that takes me into why would we forgive? And one of the reasons that I believe we find a way to forgive, or why we should practice forgiveness, is that it liberates us. It frees our bodies, our minds, and our emotions and our spirits of block. These blocks that arrive through us holding on to things that we're not able to forgive others or ourselves. And energetically, we talk about it raising the vibration. So we always want to restore our energy. We always want to create balance. And when you practice forgiveness, the heart continues to open. And when the heart opens, there's compassion. And when there's compassion, things can flow. I think my eldest daughter mentioned this word to me many years ago in one of their business ventures, and she called it the turnaround time. And when we practice regularly or practice forgiveness, any form of practice, what we find is that our turnaround time, so when something has harmed us or we have harmed and we send forgiveness to ourselves or others, we are able to move through it at a much quicker pace. But without practice and process, we stay stuck. So I encourage you that as forgiveness is an emotion, and you can feel, like Mark spoke about, that fury, how do you actually take that anger or that fury and then transmute it? See if you can take a moment to actually take that energy, like Mark did with his Course of Miracles, the steps that he needed to do, and have the mantra of what he needs to do to move through this. And that's when we need to connect to our bodies, is we feel the anger, we feel the emotion, and then if we could feel where it is in the body and we could breathe into it and ask for it to be transmuted so that we can shift and change, and that others can be free as well. Because by us be creating our own inner freedom and our own peace, we create that for other. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Val. So I just want to go back to this point on willingness, because willingness is probably the trickiest point on this whole step. If you can master awareness, awareness is pretty straightforward, but willingness is another story altogether, because you can be quite angry and want to stay angry. And I remember this quite distinctly as a child, when I got angry, that I'd want to stay angry, and sometimes we believe that we deserve to be angry at somebody. If somebody's really done something wrong, something really quite horrific, we feel that anger is justified. And that's fine. And you can stay there as long as you want. Or you can stay in whatever reaction you have as long as you want. But when you're ready, if you've got the willingness, you can move through it. And, doing this on a regular basis, it's often easier if you start off with a spiritual practice. Let's say, for example, you start off in the morning and you do a nice meditation. You do the nice meditation that Val did for us at the start of this webinar. and you're all nice and peaceful and all in a Zen space. And then you hop in your car and you drive off to work. And sure enough, a taxi is going to cut you off. You're going to get there. Your boss is going to make some remark. Somebody might do something. You might get a message from one of your parents, whatever it is, something, if something triggers you after coming out of a meditation, you can be quite aware of it quite easily. What I find is that it really feels quite uncomfortable. It's really quite unpleasant to be in that state. And I don't know how long how many years I've practiced this to get to the state, but these days I don't want to stay there any longer than I need to. And I suppose with the work that I do, I need to get out of that state quite quickly, because I can't be seeing clients if I've been triggered and if I'm angry, or whatever other emotion I might be feeling. So, this willingness is about getting back into that heart space, getting back into that centered space, that place of peace, and just feeling calm again. But the other thing about willingness for me is knowing that it's possible. It is possible to shift things very quickly when you have a spiritual practice with which to do it. And then it's quite a simple choice that you're faced with. Do you want to be in a place of peace, or do you want to be angry? And when you look at it like that, it's like, well, I can stay angry, but I know that peace is possible, and it sort of like stares me in the face. And I suppose these days I've just reached a place where I don't want to stay in the anger, but it did take some time. And Val, you also spoke about that time that it takes to turn around, the turnaround time. And I believe that with practice, you can reach that turnaround time like instantly, that you don't even get angry. And I suppose this might be a time to just bring in something that one of the lines from A Course in Miracles is that God does not forgive. And this might surprise some of you guys, but God does not forgive because he has never condemned.
Wow.
And this is why forgiveness is a practice that we need to take on, because we are the ones that are condemning. We are the ones that are seeing the faults in the others, and maybe this comes, maybe we're sort of doing things a little bit back to frontier, but if I can explain this now, the way that I understand it is that when somebody has done something to offend us, when we are triggered, let's use anger as an example because it's an easy one. When something has made us angry, what's happened is that we are perceiving what has happened, or we are perceiving that person through the lens of the ego. And the lens of the ego is clouded by our life experiences, by what's happened to us, what we've learned, what we've read, what our parents did or said, etc., etc., etc. And so the lens of the ego is very clouded. And as we move into the next step now, which is actually to ask for help, what we do is we ask a higher power to help us to heal our perception. We ask a higher power to change our perception so that we can see that person or that situation differently. Ideally, we see that situation the way, or that person the way that God sees them. And the reason we need to ask for this is because God can't force these thoughts into our head. We need to invite them in because we've got free will. And we can choose what thoughts we hold in our head. But sometimes we need a little bit of help, so we invite it. Yeah.
I just wanted to share a quote which is so beautiful from one of my favorite teachers called Thich Nhat Hanh, who I often refer to. And what he wrote was, when you look deeply into your anger, you will see that the person you call your enemy is also suffering. And as soon as you see that, The capacity for accepting and having compassion for them is there. So when we see the other through, as you said, as God sees them, then we have compassion for them. So I love that, where that's really powerful about that, see them as God sees them.
Yeah. And it was Louise Hay, I think, who said we are all victims of victims. And sometimes we need a practice to help us gain that understanding. Yeah. So that's, in a nutshell, is the third step. Ask for help. Ask a higher power in of your understanding, or in words that you're comfortable with, to help you to see that person the way that God sees them, to see them differently, to heal your perception. Then on to step 4. Hey, Val, step 4, let me just bring it up here again, just to remind you guys. Step 4 is repeat. And step 4 is also surprisingly important, because the ego is like a dog with a bone. Or imagine like trying to train a puppy. We've got a sort of puppy around our house at the moment, and a puppy doesn't listen. A puppy is always going off, sniffing, playing, wanting to do something that it shouldn't be doing. And the ego is kind of like this. The ego is going off, trying to find a reason to make you upset, trying to find a reason for you to be angry, trying to find a reason for you to be sad or whatever. The ego is always comparing and finding something to stop you from being at peace. And this is why we need to repeat the practice. And back to the example with the carpenter who stole our tools, I had to repeat the practice every 5 minutes, at least every 5 minutes. And I probably did it for about 8 hours in a row. I was so triggered, and I was so angry, and I was so stressed about the whole situation that I was in at that time, that the repetition was just essential. But it's the gap gets longer. That's the good news. It extends from every 5 minutes to maybe every 10 minutes, and then every half an hour. All right, Val, should we move on to boundaries? Because boundaries is something that's quite important for us to talk about at this stage, because forgiveness and forgiving somebody doesn't mean that we shouldn't have boundaries.
And I think people often think that if you forgive, that you condone behavior. And forgiveness is not about condoning a different forms of behavior. Forgiveness is opening your heart, and as Mark spoke about, seeing them as God sees them. And I think as we move through life and we shift and change and grow and we develop within ourselves, we start to put boundaries in. And sometimes it's very difficult when we start to enforce those boundaries. But I have to bring it back to our energy systems, Mark, where we think about our sacral area, where we talk there about healthy boundaries and our emotions, and that there's flow. And I always come back to the body. When something's happening for you and you check in with yourself and it doesn't feel okay for you, and you, like when we talk about asking for help, is this for my higher good? Is this okay for me right now? And if the answer, I love the whisper of the soul, because that whisper is a quiet one. It comes back with a quiet no. This is not, this is not good for you. And it's a quiet whisper, but often we ignore the whispers. And when we start putting in boundaries, we often find as we move and grow and shift and change that people around us don't like those boundaries. And we have to, at times, once you've set the boundary, it can't be too rigid. You can be a little bit flexible at times, but you have to know where your boundary is. And if you know clearly where your boundary is, others will know where that boundary is. And I had a little incident with somebody in our coffee group when we could still all sit together, and without permission placed his hands on my shoulders and started massaging my shoulders, which was very difficult for me as there was a trigger around that. It wasn't so much the trigger, it was that somebody had come into my personal space without permission. And I clearly, initially, it was very difficult for me to understand how I could work with this. And there was avoidance. I had a lot of avoidance around this person. And eventually, I gently whispered to him that that was not okay for me. And he's never done it again. So that was me finding the courage to put a boundary in place. And when we put our boundaries in place, then we allow ourselves to be respected and to be treated in the way that we deserve and want to be treated. And I think it's a very powerful thing to have good, healthy, strong boundaries in your life of how you treat others and how you allow them to treat you.
Yeah, I think often we get upset because people breach the boundaries that we actually never had.
Yes.
The boundaries that we don't enforce get breached because people don't even know that they're there, and then we get upset at it, you know. But boundaries is sometimes just simply saying no.
Yep.
And in my example with the alcoholic carpenter, obviously when he came back to work the following week on Monday morning, I politely told him that he didn't have a job anymore. This is a boundary. But I could have, when I first noticed that he seemed to like a drink, is I could have enforced a stronger boundary then, which would have avoided the situation altogether. So, you know, boundaries are very difficult for people who aren't used to having boundaries. And I suppose I was probably one of those. But I think it's worth practicing because it's only uncomfortable at first. And then once we've actually put that boundary into place, we forget the discomfort that we felt putting it into place. And then we can get quite comfortable holding that boundary in place. Val, what do you find?
And Mark, I really believe that when you put boundaries in place and then you have healthy boundaries, you operate from a position of power. And the power is not about our power over, but your own empowered self. So when you say your no is clear, and you operate from the strength from deep within and also inner wisdom. So when you hold those boundaries around certain things in your life, you are actually then taking good care of yourself. And I always come back to this as human beings having this experience here on this planet Earth. Self-care is such a critical part of how we take care of ourselves and show kindness and compassion to ourselves. And one of the ways of self-care is having healthy boundaries. And then in turn, we can have boundaries with others, and we respect boundaries more from an empowered place. So I really feel and know the benefit in my own life when I've put boundaries in place and I've held them, and from a heart-centered space with a firmness that allows me to step into my own power.
Yeah. Thanks, Val. Let's move on to the next topic, which is how the ego likes to hijack forgiveness. How the ego uses, in a term from A Course in Miracles, it calls it forgiveness to destroy. So forgiveness as an attack on another. And there are 4 very interesting ways that this takes place. How the ego uses forgiveness as a weapon. And this is very interesting because we've all done this. We've all done it. So one of these or many of these at some time or another. The first example is when you forgive somebody so that because you feel that you're better than them and you're going to make them feel worse than you. So you forgive because you are better than the other one. All right. So if you've got any examples, I'd love to see those in the chat box. So if you've got examples of doing any of these and you're happy to share, I'd love to hear them. The second way that this happens is I forgive because I'm also a sinner. So, it's a simple example. If somebody arrives late for a meeting and you say, don't worry, it's okay, I'm always late too, or a friend of yours gets drunk and says something silly and you say, don't worry, I've also done that. These are examples of forgiving because you're both sinners. The third way that the ego does this is where the ego likes to be the martyr. So the ego then, and this ties in with the boundaries or the lack of boundaries, the ego keeps tolerating somebody else's abuse. I'm going to forgive you, but I'm going to let you attack me because what I'm actually doing is I'm making you guilty. And that's the unconscious part. I'm the martyr. That means you the guilty party. And this is actually an unconscious attack on the other. And then the fourth way that the ego uses forgiveness is conditional forgiveness. I will forgive you if, or I will forgive you when. And this is an interesting one, because when you do that, you're holding that other person captive in a way. They are then bound by this agreement. But what's actually happening is your inner peace is subject to the other person's behavior.
Yep.
So let's say you're in a relationship and you say, I'll forgive you if you promise never to cheat on me again. But your inner peace is now dependent on their behavior. And what if they decide that they actually do want to cheat on you again? All of a sudden, you've lost your inner peace. And that might be a difficult example to look at, but it's pretty clear that, we're placing our energy, our inner peace in the hands of somebody else. All right, Val, any thoughts about those 4 types of forgiveness?
No, I think what comes to mind for me is about working with the ego and how powerful the ego is. And I think often spiritually we think, I should have no, I'm so spiritual, I have no ego, I've moved along the path and there's no ego. And I really believe that we need to have a healthy functioning ego. And by pretending that we have no ego is actually also weaponizing the ego towards ourselves, because we're not finding a way to understand, to function from a healthy space. And a functioning ego is healthy. So it's not unhealthy to have a healthy ego. It's when we use it as a weapon against self and other that it's destructive. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah. And Val, do you have that? You had a quote, Alec Baldwin. No,
it's a quote from one of the
James
teachers
Baldwin.
taught, and James Baldwin wrote, I imagine one of the reasons we cling to hate and prejudice so stubbornly is he senses that we do it is so that we are not forced to deal with our own pain. So when we cling to everything that grieves us pain for so long and we hold on to it, that somebody else has done, then we don't have to look at ourselves. And I think this whole practice around forgiveness is moving inward to look at yourself. And then that is what emanates outward and brings light to the other.